I do live here. I bought this house. I shouldn't have to prove that. Okay.
Pay attention to the man carrying the box up the walkway. His name is Marcus Bennett. He's 29 years old, a software engineer, and today he's moving into 847 Riverside Drive, a modest 2-bedroom townhome he saved 3 years to afford. The box he's carrying contains books. Law books, actually. His younger sister starts law school in the fall. Now pay attention to the woman watching from across the street. Her name is Patricia Holcomb. She's 56, retired, and has lived on Riverside Drive for 18 years. She's holding her phone. Within 6 minutes, that phone would be used to make a 911 call that would destroy her reputation, cost her job on the neighborhood association, and result in a lawsuit she couldn't win. But in this moment, Patricia Holcomb was convinced she was protecting her community. She was wrong. Marcus Bennett had been moving boxes for 40 minutes when he noticed the woman staring. She stood on her front porch, arms crossed, phone in hand. He'd waved once. She hadn't waved back. Marcus didn't think much of it. New neighborhoods took time. People were cautious. He understood that. What Marcus didn't know was that Patricia Holcomb had already taken 3 photos of him. She'd texted them to the neighborhood watch group chat with a message. "Anyone know this guy? Moving stuff into the Johnson's old place." The responses came quickly. "Never seen him. Didn't know it sold. Call the landlord?" Patricia Holcomb made a different call. The 911 dispatch log for Franklin County would later show the call came in at 2:20 p.m. The caller identified herself as Patricia Holcomb. Her address, 848 Riverside Drive. Her concern, suspicious activity across the street. The dispatcher asked standard questions. Patricia's answers painted a picture. A black man, late 20s, moving items in and out of a residence. No moving truck, no company logo. Just a sedan in the driveway and box after box being carried inside. The dispatcher asked if the man appeared threatening. Patricia hesitated. Then she said something that would be played in courtrooms and media coverage for months. "He looks like he's casing the place." The dispatcher promised to send an officer to investigate. Patricia Holcomb returned to her window to watch. She felt she'd done the right thing. She was protecting property values, protecting her neighbors, protecting the community she'd called home for nearly 2 decades. She had no idea what she'd actually done. Officer Denise Moreno arrived in a marked cruiser. She'd been with Columbus PD for 7 years. She'd responded to dozens of suspicious person calls. Most were misunderstandings. Some were racially motivated. All required the same thing: professionalism and de-escalation. Moreno approached Marcus as he was unloading a lamp from his trunk. The interaction was brief and professional. Marcus provided his driver's license. He provided the deed to the property, freshly notarized, dated March 15th. He provided the name of his realtor and the moving company scheduled to arrive the following morning with his furniture. Officer Moreno reviewed the documents. Everything checked out. Marcus Bennett was exactly who he claimed to be, the new owner of 847 Riverside Drive. Moreno apologized for the inconvenience. Marcus said he understood. He'd expected this, actually. It had happened before. At his apartment complex, at his gym, once at his own office building. Someone always assumed he didn't belong. Officer Moreno returned to her cruiser and radioed dispatch. False alarm. No crime. Property owner confirmed. Then she walked across the street to 848 Riverside Drive. Patricia Holcomb opened the door before Officer Moreno could knock. Moreno's body camera captured the entire exchange. Patricia asked if the man had been arrested. Moreno explained that no arrest had been made because no crime had occurred. The man was the legal owner of the property. Patricia's expression shifted from concern to confusion to something else. Defensiveness. She insisted she'd been right to call. The neighborhood had been experiencing break-ins. She was being vigilant. She was being a good neighbor. Officer Moreno's response was measured but direct. "Ma'am, calling 911 because a black man is moving into his own home isn't vigilance. It's racial profiling." Patricia Holcomb began to argue. Then she stopped. The weight of what she'd done was beginning to settle. Officer Moreno returned to her vehicle. No citations were issued. No charges filed. It appeared the situation had been resolved. It hadn't. Not even close. Marcus Bennett posted about the incident on social media. The post was simple and factual. He'd been moving into his new home when a neighbor called the police on him. He included the body cam footage, which he'd requested and received through a public records request. He included the 911 call audio, also public record. The post went viral within 6 hours. Local news outlets picked up the story by the following morning. National outlets followed by the afternoon. Patricia Holcomb's name, face, and address were now public knowledge. The internet had given her a new name, Moving Day Patricia. The backlash was immediate and severe. Patricia's employer, a mid-sized insurance firm where she worked part-time as a consultant, terminated her contract. The statement was brief. The company did not condone discriminatory behavior and had severed all ties with Ms. Holcomb. The Riverside Drive Neighborhood Association removed her from the board. The vote was unanimous. Her social media accounts were flooded with messages. Some were supportive. Most were not. Patricia deleted her accounts within 24 hours, but the damage was done, and it was about to get worse. On April 12th, Marcus Bennett filed a civil lawsuit against Patricia Holcomb. The charges: defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and violation of the Fair Housing Act. The lawsuit outlined the facts. Patricia had photographed Marcus without permission, distributed those photos with false claims of criminal activity, and made a false police report based solely on his race. The lawsuit cited the 911 call, the body cam footage, and testimony from Officer Moreno. Patricia's attorney attempted to argue that she'd acted in good faith, that she genuinely believed suspicious activity was occurring. Marcus's attorney countered with phone records. They showed Patricia had texted 3 neighbors after Officer Moreno left, claiming, "They're moving those people into our neighborhood now." The text messages destroyed any claim of good faith. The case never went to trial. Patricia's attorney advised her to settle. The settlement amount was not disclosed. Court documents showed that Patricia Holcomb agreed to pay damages, issue a public apology, and complete anti-bias training. She also agreed never to contact Marcus Bennett or enter his property. Patricia Holcomb released a statement through her attorney. She expressed regret for her actions and acknowledged she'd allowed implicit bias to cloud her judgment. She hoped to learn from the experience. The statement did little to repair her reputation. The incident triggered a broader investigation into 911 call patterns in Franklin County. Researchers from Ohio State University analyzed 5 years of dispatch logs. They focused on calls classified as suspicious person in residential neighborhoods. The findings were stark. Black residents were 4.7 times more likely to be reported as suspicious than white residents engaged in identical activities. The disparity increased in predominantly white neighborhoods, where black residents were 6.2 times more likely to be reported. The study identified common triggers: moving into a home, walking through a neighborhood, sitting in a parked car, entering an apartment building. Activities that would be considered normal for white residents were treated as suspicious when performed by black residents. The Columbus Police Department implemented new training protocols as a result. Dispatchers were trained to ask more detailed questions before dispatching officers to suspicious person calls. Officers were trained on implicit bias and de-escalation techniques specific to racially motivated calls. The changes were named the Bennett Protocols, after Marcus Bennett. Patricia Holcomb moved out of Riverside Drive 4 months after the incident. She sold her home at a loss. The market value had dropped after the negative publicity. She relocated to a smaller town outside Columbus where she hoped for anonymity. She didn't find it. Her reputation followed her online. Future employers would Google her name and find the story. Potential friends would recognize her face and make excuses to leave. She became, in her own words to a local reporter, a cautionary tale. Patricia gave one interview, 9 months after the incident. She admitted she'd been wrong. She admitted her actions had been driven by bias she hadn't acknowledged in herself. She said she was ashamed. She also said she'd lost nearly everything: her job, her standing in the community, her sense of self. She didn't ask for sympathy. She simply stated facts. The reporter asked if she'd do anything differently. Patricia Holcomb's answer was immediate. I would have walked across the street and introduced myself. I would have welcomed him to the neighborhood. I would have been a neighbor instead of a watchdog. Marcus Bennett still lives at 847 Riverside Drive. He finished moving in. He met his neighbors, the ones who weren't Patricia Holcomb. Most were welcoming. Some were apologetic, embarrassed that someone on their street had done what Patricia did. Marcus didn't leave. He'd worked too hard to let someone else's prejudice drive him away. He became an advocate for fair housing and police reform. He spoke at community meetings and city council sessions. He partnered with civil rights organizations to push for stronger protections against discriminatory 911 calls. In October 2024, Columbus City Council passed an ordinance making it a civil offense to make false or racially motivated emergency calls. Violators could face fines up to $1,000. The ordinance included a private right of action, allowing victims to sue callers directly. The ordinance was named in honor of Marcus Bennett and others who'd experienced similar incidents. Marcus's advocacy work continues. He's written opinion pieces, appeared on podcasts, and testified before state legislators. His message is consistent. Bias, even implicit bias, has real consequences. Assumptions about who belongs and who doesn't cause harm. He tells his story not for sympathy, but for education. He wants people to understand what it feels like to be questioned in your own home, on your own property, by people who've decided you don't belong based solely on how you look. The incident on Riverside Drive was not isolated. Similar cases emerged across the country as the story gained traction. Media outlets compiled lists. BBQ Becky in Oakland, Permit Patty in San Francisco, Corner Store Caroline in New York, Golf Cart Gail in Florida. The pattern was identical. White individuals, usually women, calling police on black individuals engaged in ordinary activities. Barbecuing in a park, selling water, entering their own apartment building, golfing too slowly. The outcomes varied. Some callers faced no consequences. Others, like Patricia Holcomb, lost jobs and reputations. Some faced lawsuits. A few faced criminal charges for filing false reports. The incident sparked national conversations about implicit bias, weaponizing 911 calls, and the danger of suspicion based on race. Civil rights groups pushed for legislation to criminalize racially motivated false reports. Some states passed such laws. Others debated them. The Bennett case became a reference point in these discussions. It was cited in policy papers, legal briefs, and academic studies. It became a teaching example in implicit bias training. Patricia Holcomb's 6-minute phone call had consequences far beyond Riverside Drive. The audio of Patricia's 911 call was played thousands of times, in news segments, in training sessions, in courtrooms. Legal experts dissected it. Psychologists analyzed it. Community activists used it to illustrate how bias manifests. The call itself lasted 4 minutes and 18 seconds. Patricia described Marcus as suspicious 5 times. She mentioned his race in the first 30 seconds. She mentioned no specific threatening behavior. When pressed by the dispatcher, she couldn't articulate what made the activity suspicious beyond, "It doesn't look right." The dispatcher had asked, "Is he threatening anyone?" Patricia had answered, "Not yet." Those 2 words, "not yet," revealed everything. Patricia had prejudged Marcus as a threat. She'd decided the outcome before any interaction occurred. She'd called 911 not because of what Marcus was doing, but because of who she assumed he was. The assumption was wrong. Completely, devastatingly wrong. Officer Denise Moreno gave an interview to Columbus Monthly 6 months after the incident. She'd responded to hundreds of similar calls during her career. Most were exactly what the Bennett case was: misunderstandings rooted in bias. Moreno described the calls as exhausting for everyone involved. Officers were put in impossible positions, forced to investigate non-crimes while the people being investigated dealt with the indignity of having to prove they belonged in their own neighborhoods. Moreno advocated for better dispatcher training. She wanted dispatchers empowered to screen calls more aggressively, to push back on callers who couldn't articulate specific threats. She wanted consequences for people who wasted police resources on racially motivated calls. Some of her suggestions were implemented in the Bennett protocols. Others remain under consideration. Moreno said the hardest part of the Bennett call wasn't dealing with Patricia Holcomb. It was apologizing to Marcus Bennett, knowing he'd done nothing wrong but still had to prove his innocence to a police officer on his own property. That, Moreno said, was the real damage of calls like Patricia's. Riverside Drive changed after the incident. The neighborhood association implemented new community guidelines. Residents were encouraged to introduce themselves to new neighbors before calling police. The association organized welcome committees and block parties to build connections. The changes were direct responses to the Bennett incident. The association didn't want another Patricia Holcomb. They didn't want their neighborhood known for intolerance. Marcus attended the first block party. He brought his sister, the one starting law school. Neighbors introduced themselves. Some apologized for Patricia's actions. Marcus thanked them, but said he didn't hold the neighborhood responsible for one person's choices. The party was awkward at first. Then it became what block parties should be, neighbors getting to know neighbors. Marcus's next-door neighbor, an elderly white woman named Dorothy Chen, became one of his closest friends on the street. Dorothy had lived on Riverside Drive for 30 years. She'd been horrified by Patricia's call. She made a point to welcome Marcus properly, with homemade cookies and an apology for the community's failure. Dorothy and Marcus had coffee together twice a week. They watched each other's homes during vacations. They shoveled each other's driveways in winter. They were neighbors, actual neighbors. The Bennett v. Holcomb case established important legal precedent in Ohio civil courts. The settlement included a judicial finding that racially motivated 911 calls could constitute intentional infliction of emotional distress under state law. The finding opened the door for similar lawsuits. Within a year, 3 additional cases were filed in Ohio, using the Bennett case as precedent. 2 settled. 1 proceeded to trial and resulted in a $75,000 judgment against the caller. Legal scholars noted the Bennett case's significance. Prior cases had focused on police conduct after discriminatory calls. The Bennett case shifted focus to the callers themselves, holding them accountable for initiating the discriminatory encounter. The precedent wasn't perfect. Plaintiffs still had to prove the caller acted with racial animus, which required evidence beyond the call itself. But the Bennett case showed such evidence could be found in text messages, social media posts, or patterns of behavior. The case gave victims a new tool. It made calling 911 on black neighbors riskier. It made consequences real. In her single media interview, Patricia Holcomb was asked what she'd say to Marcus Bennett if given the chance. She paused for a long moment. Then she said she'd apologize. She'd acknowledge the harm she'd caused. She'd admit she'd acted on assumptions and stereotypes she hadn't examined in herself. She'd tell him she understood why he'd sued her. She'd tell him she agreed with the verdict. She'd tell him she was sorry. Not just for the call, but for every moment of doubt and fear she'd caused him. For making him prove his humanity to a police officer. For making him defend his right to exist in his own home. Patricia said she thought about Marcus often. She wondered how he was doing. She hoped he was happy in the home she'd tried to take from him. The reporter asked if she'd attempted to apologize directly. Patricia said no. The settlement prohibited contact, and even if it hadn't, she wasn't sure she had the right to ask for his forgiveness. Some actions, she said, can't be undone with apologies. She was right about that. Marcus Bennett still lives at 847 Riverside Drive. The townhome is fully furnished now. The books are on shelves. The law books belong to his sister, who's finishing her first year at Ohio State's law school. She visits every Sunday for dinner. Marcus's career has flourished. He was promoted to senior software engineer. He's considering a second degree in public policy. He wants to work on criminal justice reform full-time. The viral video has faded from social media feeds, replaced by newer outrages and fresher injustices. But its impact remains. The Bennett protocols are still in effect. The Columbus Ordinance still carries Patricia Holcomb's legacy as a cautionary tale. Marcus gave a speech at Ohio State in March 2025, on the anniversary of the incident. He spoke to a packed auditorium of students, faculty, and community members. He told his story. He talked about bias, about assumptions, about the cost of snap judgments. He ended with a simple message. See people as individuals. Question your assumptions. welcome your neighbors. And if you're not sure whether someone belongs, start with the assumption that they do. Patricia Holcomb's phone call lasted 4 minutes and 18 seconds. The consequences lasted much longer. She'd made a decision based on suspicion and bias. She'd weaponized 911. She'd assumed the worst about a stranger based solely on his race. She'd been wrong about everything, and she'd regretted it almost immediately. But regret didn't undo the harm. It didn't erase Marcus's experience of having to prove his innocence in his own driveway. It didn't restore Patricia's reputation or her place in the community. The incident served as a reminder. Bias has consequences. Assumptions have weight. Phone calls can't be taken back. Marcus Bennett moved into 847 Riverside Drive on March 22, 2024. He's still there. He belongs there. He always did. That's what matters most.